Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into a really key period, the age of those huge land-based empires, roughly 1450 to 1750.
Right? Thinking Ottomans, Moguls, Ming China, these massive states.
Exactly. And the big question is, how did the rulers actually run these enormous places? Keep control over so many different people and territories.
It's a fascinating puzzle.
So if you've ever wondered how these empires managed not just to expand, but to actually stick around, well, you're in the right place. We've got some great material here. And our mission today is pretty straightforward. We want to unpack the methods, some clever, some frankly brutal, that these rulers used to show they were in charge and to make sure they stayed in charge.
Absolutely. And to really get a handle on it, we'll focus on two main ideas. First, legitimacy. How did they convince people they had the right to rule?
Okay, communicating their authority.
Exactly. And second, consolidation. So what practical steps did they take to grab power and, crucially, hold on to it?
Right, makes sense. So where do we start? Maybe with the basics, like how they organized the government, the military.
Good starting point. Because a really big trend across these land-based empires in this era was the growth of bureaucracies. They got bigger, more complex.
Which stands to reason, doesn't it? Bigger empire, more stuff to manage.
Precisely. You needed more officials, more systems, and a fantastic example of this is the Ottoman Empire's Devshirme system.
The Devshirme. Yeah, this one's really interesting. So the Ottomans, they were expanding, especially into the Balkans, and they started recruiting young boys from Christian families there. But it wasn't just like a random draft.
No, not at all. It was very systematic. These boys were taken from their families, brought to Istanbul. First step, often living with Turkish families to learn the language, convert to Islam.
Okay.
Then the brightest, the most promising, they received this really high-level Islamic education right there in the capital. Think top-tier schools.
So you end up with enslaved Christian boys becoming these, well, highly trained government officials. That seems counterintuitive almost.
It does, but think about the genius of it from the Sultan's perspective.
Right. What was the angle?
You're creating a whole class of administrators and military leaders, as we'll see, who owe everything to the Sultan. Their power, their position, their very lives. They weren't part of the old Turkish aristocracy with their own power bases.
I see. So their loyalty was basically built in. They had no other power base to rely on.
Exactly. It was a brilliant way to consolidate personal power by creating an elite completely dependent on the ruler.
Okay, so loyalty by design. But the Devshirme wasn't just about staffing the government offices, was it? It fed the military, too.
That's right. The Janissaries. Probably the most famous part of the Ottoman military machine.
The elite infantry.
The elite infantry, yes. They were also products of the Devshir. Enslaved Christians, trained from a young age to be soldiers, totally loyal to the Sultan. They formed the core of this growing professional standing army.
Which you definitely need if you're expanding an empire and keeping order.
Essential for both expansion and internal control.
So the Ottomans had this really unique system using enslaved people for both top administrators and top soldiers. Let's switch gears a bit. What about Tokugawa Japan? The samurai there. Their role changed quite a bit, didn't it? It's a real contrast.
A huge contrast, yes. The Tokugawa shogunate brought relative peace to Japan from the early 1600s.
Right, less fighting.
Much less fighting. So the samurai, who were traditionally warriors, well, what do they do now? Many transitioned into bureaucratic roles, working for the regional lords, the daimyo, or for the central government, the shogunate.
Okay, so they became administrators. And how did they get paid? It wasn't just about land anymore, was it?
Increasingly, no. They were paid fixed stipends, often in rice, by their lords.
Oh.
And that shift is important. It made them much more dependent on their lords for income rather than relying on their own estates like in the past.
So over time, that dependence actually weakened their own power base.
Exactly. It weakened their traditional autonomy. And for many samurai, it actually led to economic problems down the line. It's another way, a different way. A ruler or ruling class can consolidate power by changing the economic status of a potentially powerful group.
Fascinating. Different empires, different solutions to the same basic problems of control. Okay, let's shift focus. What about the more, let's say, symbolic ways rulers cemented their power? Religion, art, big building projects.
Hugely important. Religion especially. Claiming that God or the gods are on your side. That's powerful stuff.
You bet.
Look at the Mexica, the Aztecs, their practice of human sacrifice. It wasn't just, random violence. It was deeply tied into their worldview.
Right, the idea that the sun god needed human blood to keep going, to make sure the sun rose every day, that belief was older than the Mexican Empire, but they really scaled it up.
It really did. The rulers and the priests worked together, conducting these massive rituals, often sacrificing prisoners captured in war, sometimes thousands at a time. And these huge public spectacles, they weren't just about pleasing the gods. They were a terrifyingly clear message about who was in charge, who held the power of life and death, who kept the cosmos running.
Yeah, hard to argue with that kind of display. Gruesome, but effective messaging. Okay, what about Europe? We have the divine right of kings. Less bloody, maybe, but the same core idea.
Pretty much the same core idea, yes.
Yeah.
Divine right meant the king's authority came directly from God. In Christian Europe, specifically via Jesus' approval.
Okay.
So, if the king is God's chosen ruler on earth, well, opposing the king isn't just treason, it's basically a sin. It's going against God's will.
That puts a bit of a damper on rebellion, I imagine.
It certainly raises the stakes. It became a cornerstone of royal power in many European countries, making people think twice or 3 times before challenging the monarch.
Right. Challenging the king is like challenging your faith. Okay, let's hop over to West Africa. The Songhai Empire. They used Islam, but maybe in a slightly different way, more about unity.
Exactly. Rulers like Askia Muhammad, who was very influential, actively promoted Islam as the state religion. The Songhai Empire was diverse, so Islam acted as this unifying force.
And that helps legitimize the rulers.
Absolutely. They supported Islamic law, funded Islamic education, set up courts. Timbuktu became this renowned center of learning.
Right.
And they encouraged things like the pilgrimage to Mecca, built impressive mosques. This connected Songhai to the wider Muslim world, boosting its prestige and the ruler's authority along with it.
So religion used for legitimacy, for unity, for connection. Okay. What about art? How do you use a painting to consolidate power?
Well, think about the Qing dynasty in China, especially the portraits of Emperor Kangxi.
Okay, Kangxi. Now, the king rulers, they weren't Han Chinese, were they? They were Manchu.
Correct. They were outsiders, ethnically speaking. So Kangxi had these official portraits made and displayed prominently in the imperial city.
And what was special about them?
The way he was depicted was very carefully managed. He was shown embodying traditional Confucian values, the wise scholar, the benevolent ruler, the upholder of harmony and order.
Ah, so things the Han Chinese majority valued deeply.
Precisely. It was a visual campaign, you could say, to legitimize his rule by showing he respected and embodied their core cultural ideals, even though he was Manchu. It was about bridging that gap.
Smart. Projecting an image to win acceptance. Okay, let's move to something even more solid. Architecture. Big palaces, temples. Hard to ignore those.
Exactly. Monumental architecture is a very direct statement. Look at my power. Look at my wealth. Look at my connection to the divine. Think about the Inca Sun Temple in Cusco, the Coricancha.
And the Inca rulers themselves were seen as
descendants of the sun god, Inti. So building this incredibly lavish temple to the sun god, covering its walls in gold, filling it with golden statues.
Those are gold.
Sheets of gold, golden statues. It directly reinforced their divine connection and supreme status. It's not just a building, it's proof of your divine mandate, built with unimaginable wealth.
Can't argue with walls of gold. Okay, shifting to the Mughal Empire in India, we see some truly stunning buildings there too.
Oh, absolutely. Mughal mausolea, mosques. They were powerful symbols. They screamed wealth, power, and devotion to Islam.
The Taj Mahal being the most famous example, obviously.
Commissioned by Shah Jahan for his wife, Mumtaz Mahal. Yes, it's a monument to love, but it's also an incredible display of Mughal sophistication, resources, and artistry. And mosques like the Jama Masjid in Delhi, huge structures, asserted the importance of Islam in the empire.
And the style itself was significant, wasn't it, that blend?
Yes. The blend of Persian, Indian, and Islamic styles was deliberate. It symbolized a cultural fusion the Mughals were trying to foster.
Right. Okay, and then Europe palaces. Versailles has to be the ultimate example, doesn't it?
It really is hard to top Versailles. Built for Louis XIV of France, the Sun King.
It wasn't just big, it was astronomically huge.
The scale is overwhelming. The palace, the gardens, everything was designed to impress, to awe, to communicate the absolute power of the French monarch. But Louis used it for more than just showing off.
Oh, how so? It was a tool for control, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He required the French nobility to spend significant time residing at Versailles.
Right, he made them move in, basically.
Pretty much. By keeping them there, under his eye, competing for his favor, dependent on him for status and privilege. He effectively neutralized their independent power back in their home regions.
Ah, so he pulled them away from their own power bases.
Exactly. Versailles became this sort of luxurious prison, a gilded cage that centralized power firmly in Louis's hands while dazzling everyone.
Wow. Both a symbol and a strategy. Okay, so building all this, running armies, bureaucracies, it all costs a fortune. How did they pay for it all? How did finance play into consolidating power?
Money is crucial, obviously. You need reliable revenue streams. The Mughal Empire had an interesting system with their zemindars.
Okay, remind us about the context there. Muslim rulers, mostly Hindu population.
Correct. So to collect taxes efficiently across this huge, diverse empire, the Mughals used local landowners, the zamindars. These local figures were responsible for collecting taxes from the peasants in their areas and passing it up to the central government.
So sort of subcontracting tax collection. How did that help consolidate power?
Well, by bringing these local elites into the imperial system, giving them a stake in it, the Mughals extended their reach. The zamindars benefited from their role, so they had an incentive to support the Mughal state.
Right.
It helped co-opt potential rivals and made tax collection more effective.
Clever. Use the existing local power structure. Okay, back to the Ottomans. They had a different system, right? Tax farming. Sounds a bit iffy.
It could be. Tax farming basically meant the government auctioned off the right to collect taxes in a certain area for a set period.
To the highest bidder.
To the highest bidder. That bidder, the tax farmer, paid the government up front, and then their profit came from collecting more than what they paid the state.
Okay, I can see how that might lead to problems for the taxpayers, squeezing them hard.
It definitely could. High potential for corruption and abuse. But for the Ottoman state, the benefit was getting guaranteed cash up front, regardless of the actual harvest or economic conditions that year. And they didn't have to pay salaries to a whole army of tax collectors.
Right. Outsource the risk and the administrative burden. Efficiency, but with a potential human cost. Okay, what about the Mexica? How did they fund their empire?
Largely through tribute. They kept incredibly detailed records, tribute lists, specifying exactly what conquered territories had to send to the capital, Tenochtitlan.
So, demands from the people they conquered? What kind of things?
All sorts. Food staples like maize and beans, luxury goods like feathers and jade, textiles, precious metals, and, as we mentioned, people for sacrifices.
Wow.
This tribute system was absolutely fundamental. It fueled the empire's wealth and was a constant, forceful reminder to everyone about who was in charge.
A very direct form of economic control. Okay, one more. The Ming Dynasty in China, they made a big shift towards using silver for taxes, didn't they?
Yes, a really significant move. They started requiring taxes to be paid in silver, hard currency, rather than in goods like grain or in labor service, which had been common before.
What was the effect of that?
Well, it helped standardize the economy, made trade easier, both within China and internationally. China became a huge sink for global silver.
But there were downsides.
There were. The massive influx of silver, especially from the Americas via Europeans, eventually caused serious inflation. And making the whole economy so dependent on silver made it vulnerable to fluctuations in the global supply and price. It contributed to economic problems later in the dynasty.
So even a modernizing move like shifting to currency had complex consequences for stability and power. It really shows how all these things, bureaucracy, military, religion, art, finance, were interconnected.
Absolutely. Rulers couldn't rely on just one thing. They used this whole toolkit of administration, armies, belief systems, grand displays, economic policies, all working together to legitimize their rule and consolidate their grip on these vast land empires between 1450 and 1750.
It's been fascinating unpacking all these different strategies. As we wrap up, it really makes you think, looking at these historical methods, how do leaders and states today in the 21st century legitimize and consolidate their power?
Good question.
We don't often see rulers claiming direct divine right anymore or building quite the same kind of monumental palaces for the same reasons. So what are the modern equivalents? How is information used or controlled? How is loyalty built? How are resources managed to maintain authority now? Are today's methods actually as effective as what we've seen from the Ottomans or the Mughals or Louis XIV? Something to chew on.
Definitely food for thought.
Well, that's all we have time for on this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.